Dear Dr. Craig, I have a question dealing with what constitutes a good argument. You frequently state in your popular work that a good argument must be logically valid, be sound, and have premises more plausible than their negations.
I want to be clear about what makes for a good argument, because sometimes this is a source of confusion. An argument doesn't need to prove its conclusion with 100% certainty in order to be a good argument. Rather, a good argument must meet three conditions. Number one, it obeys the rules of logic. It obeys the rules of logic. That is to say, the conclusion follows logically from the premises. Two, its premises are true. It must not only be logically valid, but the premises of the argument must be true. And thirdly, the premises are more plausible than their opposites. The premises are more plausible than their negations or their contradictories. So the premises don't need to be certainly true. They simply need to be more plausibly true than their negations.
Now, I know you rightly ignore the popular objections to your work raised by internet atheists, but regarding your third criterion, I think they raise a valid point. Several atheists and skeptics, both on YouTube and elsewhere, have objected that there exist counterexamples to your third criterion, that the premises must be more plausible than their negation. The first one proceeds as follows: 1. If A and B, then C2. A3. B4. Therefore, C. Now suppose we learn that the credence, I'm using this term in a probabilistic sense, for believing 1 is 1, and the credence for believing 2 and 3 are each 0.6. Now, here is the problem: although all three premises are more plausible than their negations, all of them have a credence above 0.5, their conclusion does not. For when the probabilities of the premises are multiplied, the conclusion's credence is a mere 0.36. So something clearly went wrong, but what? Another example proffered which does not use probability is as follows: 1. It is raining. 2. My neighbor's dog is outside. 3. Therefore, it is raining, and my neighbor's dog is outside. This is a logically valid argument, since the conclusion follows from an inference rule known as conjunction introduction. So here's the problem with this argument: 1 might be more plausible than its negation, because I might see rain falling through my window, whereas 2 might be more plausible than its negation, since I know my neighbor's dog is always outside. Yet, I'm nowhere near as certain about the conclusion. If my neighbor is a good owner, he would bring his dog in when it rains, meaning that the conclusion is less plausible than its negation. Moreover, one cannot say that 2 is implausible because it is raining, for he then is bringing 1 into consideration and is therefore commenting on the argument's conclusion. So Dr. Craig, these are the main issues raised atheists and skeptics on the internet against your third criterion. Is there any way for one to answer them? And if they are right, then how should seekers of truth approach the premises of an argument, and how much warrant should they demand of them? Thank you and God bless. Pranav.
It's scary how really desperate these people are becoming. Far from raising valid points, Pranav, these objections are just worthless, based on fundamental misunderstandings. The fellows who posted these criticisms on YouTube, if they continue their study of philosophy, are going to be very embarrassed someday about these videos. Let me back up and take a run at your question. What makes for a sound deductive argument? The answer is true premises and valid logic. An argument is sound if the premises of the argument are true and the conclusion follows from the premises by the logical rules of inference. If these two conditions are met, then the conclusion of the argument is guaranteed to be true. However, to be a good argument, an argument must be more than just sound. If the premises of an argument are true, but we have no evidence for the truth of those premises, then the argument will not be a good one. It may, unbeknownst to us, be sound, but in the absence of any evidence for its premises it won't, or at least shouldn't, convince anyone. The premises have to have some sort of epistemic warrant for us in order for a sound argument to be a good one. This is why question-begging arguments are not good arguments. A person is guilty of begging the question if his only reason for believing in a premise is that he already believes in the conclusion. For example, suppose you were to present the following argument for the existence of God. 1. Either God exists or the moon is made of green cheese. 2. The moon is not made of green cheese. 3. Therefore, God exists. Now this is a sound argument for God's existence. Its premises are both true and the conclusion follows from the premises by the rules of logic, specifically disjunctive syllogism. Nevertheless, the argument is not any good because the only reason for believing the first premise to be true is that you already believe that God exists. A disjunction is true if one of the disjuncts is true. But that's the argument's conclusion. Therefore, in putting forward this argument you reasoning in a circle or begging the question. The only reason you believe 1 is because you believe 3. So, soundness is not sufficient for making an argument a good one. Something more is needed concerning the warrant the premises have for us. Following the lead of George Mavrot and Steve Davis, I've argued that what is needed is that the premises be not only true but more plausible than their opposites or negations. If it is more plausible that a premise is, in light of the evidence, true rather than false, then we should believe the premises. I trust that this clears up the gross misunderstanding propagated in a YouTube video that when I say that the premises of a good argument must be more plausibly true than their negations, I'm positing a range of additional truth values in between true and false. No, I presume the classical principle of bivalence, according to which there are only two truth values, true and false. They are different degrees of plausibility, not of truth, given the varying amounts of evidence in support of one's premises. Moreover, in a valid deductive argument, like the claimed cosmological argument, any probabilities assigned to the premises are not used to calculate the probability of the conclusion. I actually prefer to speak of plausibility rather than probability to avoid the problem that it is often difficult to assign probability values to the premises. But never mind. If the premises are true, then it follows necessarily that conclusion is true, period. It's logically fallacious to multiply the probabilities of the premises to try to calculate the probability of the conclusion. That's why you wind up with the clearly wrong results that you did. In a sound deductive argument, the most we can say about the probability of the argument's conclusion is that it cannot be less than some lower bound, but it could be as high as 100%. So with respect to your first example, we have here a valid deductive argument, since from 2 and 3 we may infer 3, and b, and from 1 and 3 it follows logically that 4. All we need to find out is whether there are better reasons to believe 1, 2, and 3, rather than their opposites. If there are, then you have a good argument for 4. The probability of 4 doesn't even enter the picture. As for your second example, this is also, as you note, a valid argument. So you just need to find out whether the evidence makes each premise more likely to be true than its negation. The misgiving you share is simply evidence that 2 may not be more plausible than its negation. You're entitled to look at all the evidence relevant to 2. If it's raining or 40 degrees below zero, or you heard your wife say your neighbor was taking his dog to the vet today, etc., you may well have good grounds for thinking 2 is not true. You might know, example 1. If it is raining, my neighbor takes his dog inside. It follows from 1 and 1 that 2 is false. But if, on balance, the evidence supports 1 and 2 rather than their opposites, then you've got a good argument for 3. So if these are really the main issues raised atheists and skeptics on the internet against my third criterion, we're in great shape, and they are in deep trouble.
I am just appalled, honestly, when I read the stuff that's out there on the internet, how inept and sophomoric people are. I'm afraid that many young people just have never been exposed
to good, rigorous argumentation.